Welcome to Job Tales, the show where we find out about different professions from around the world. Each week I speak to a new guest with a very interesting job. I'm Laura Leoncini and today my guest is Lorraine Mcdowell, data scientist in the pharmaceutical industry. Lorraine, welcome to Job Tales. Happy to have you as my guest, as our young listeners might not know of the existence of your profession. So can you tell me what inspired you to become a data scientist?
It's more a question of how did I stumble into becoming a data scientist?
Okay.
I did stumble. It wasn't really a dedicated path that I felt I was going to follow. I was very interested in helping my friends to improve their quality of life. I remember particularly one of my dear friends at school who had migraines, and this is a very deliberating disease that affects mainly women. And I said to her at a very young age, when I grow up, I'm going to find something to cure you. And at that time, the only way you could cure people is to be a doctor and to go into medicine. But of course, there are other ways as well. A doctor uses the research as provided, but as a data scientist, I was able to join a pharmaceutical company who specialized in treating what was a new disease area in those days, which was migraines. And I worked on the first drug in that class called sumatriptan to help people with migraines, and it has made a large difference and opened up a whole new caveat of new types of drugs that can be used for that. So it was a desire to help people, and at that time I didn't know how it was possible, but that was what drove me into being a data scientist and join the pharmaceutical industry to help in the research of new disease areas.
Did you keep your promise to your friend? Did you find a cure?
I worked on the first drug for migraines, which was developed by the pharma company Glaxo, which now is GSK.
Okay.
And we did bring a drug to market, and I did tell her to go to the doctor and ask for that particular drug.
Okay.
And since then, many more drugs have been developed around that area to help people, because it turns out that it was largely unreported disease, which when they started reporting more and more of it, they found different things that trigger migraines and different ways to help migraine patients. And it's a disease that largely affects women, and can cause them not to pass exams because it comes on during stressful times. It doesn't help very much in the workplace because the migraine sufferer often has to take time off work to be able to recover from that. So by finding a drug that can really help and understand how to manage the disease can change so many lives. It's quite
The
incredible.
quality of life. I remember I had a friend who also had suffered terrible migraines. She had to go back home and just close all the windows and really try to go through those, I don't know, that hour or 2 hours of hell and then and then feel a bit better later.
It's awful. Yeah,
Yeah.
really awful.
And so it seems that your drive is to really help people have a healthy life and a quality of life. And I assume, tell me if I'm wrong, that you knew your path was going to be somehow scientific when you chose your, let's say, academic path. What did you study when you finished high school?
So when I finished high school, I went to St Andrews University in Scotland, and I started doing biochemistry, only to find out that there was this brand new area, academic area, called genetics. So I then switched to doing genetics, and I was amongst the first group of people that studied genetics as a degree. And it was from there that I was able to understand and learn more about the future of drug development, which was going to be biotechnology.
Wow,
So
amazing.
when I joined the first company, biotechnology wasn't there. It was all in theory.
It wasn't a
And it was
thing,
only
right?
when I moved to Switzerland that I was able to finally fulfill my dream of actually working in a biotech company.
Amazing. So you were talking in the 1980s when you were studying.
Yes.
Was that just the
That long
beginning?
ago.
And I'm closer to your age, but our listeners might be a bit younger. I mean, they're definitely younger. Those who want to know more about, what to do in life.
Even in those days when we were doing genetics, as we were studying, like on the day we were studying, there was new things happening all the time around genetics. The human genome was being mapped. And even now, there's new things happening in genetics like every day. This morning I woke up and I heard that a child was, who was deaf, was treated with gene therapy. They discovered the gene that actually affected the child's hearing, and they're able to cure it through gene therapy. So from a very early start, then in the 80s and even now, gene therapy and genetics is such an exciting field. It's never stopped to deliver for me in terms of new information, new learnings.
That's so true, eh? So had your, what, 5 years of genetics, first biochemistry and then genetics, and then you graduated in genetics?
I graduated in genetics, yes. I applied for my first job. I wanted to work in some kind of medical or clinical field, and I literally just had my CV printed and sent it off to Glaxo, and they accepted me as a new start as a graduate.
Okay.
And it was from there that I was able to develop my career. Didn't realize at the time exactly what was, what the future would hold for me.
What was happening right then? Yeah. And I guess also
Yeah.
for companies like Laxo and others, it was such a privilege to have CVs that were, about genetics, I imagine, because it was such a new field that there was not so much competition, let's say, for you. Or did you feel that you had to go through quite some selection process?
I don't think they recruited me specifically for genetics. They recruited me for having a science background and having a science aptitude. So
Okay.
understanding how protocols are written, understanding how to the methodology of running an experiment, analyzing information. So it was more that I had the foundation to be able to take it further. And then after that, it was more about tenacity and staying in the job and learning what was available at the time. So typically, scientists will join a company or institution because they have the strong science, but they don't
Mm.
always have the good management skills. And people management still has to be taught. It's not something that's just intuitive.
Hmm.
So I think along my career journey, one of the things I was most grateful for was I was a scientist. I was also interested in managing people and curing people, managing people, dealing with people, working in a team. I had a strong sporting background. So to find companies along the route who were willing to invest in training me to have management skills was really important and really benefited me along the way.
I see. And so do you find that in your, during your studies, was it easy for you to deal with, scientific data and having a scientific mind? I mean, I'm talking if as thinking about listeners who are attracted to a similar path and academia that you have done, but maybe don't feel as scientific as one should be. What is your opinion on that?
It used to be a situation where you had to choose science or arts, and for me, the science just made sense all the time. You had a beginning and a middle and a conclusion,
Hmm.
and you work from hypothesis. So for me, I would get the answer eventually, whereas for arts, it's more about kind of, from my perspective at the time, was more about lateral thinking and thinking differently, which also has its place in science because you
Yeah.
have to hypothesize and you have to use your imagination and bring in lots of different tracks from your memory bank and put them all together in order to get hypothesis. But I think science for me was a thing that was continuously evolving, continuously giving answers, continuously, breaking the frontiers. And I could just see myself being able to work in that area because every day would be something new, something different, a new learning, and something I could incorporate into either my life, my family's life, or friends and family surrounding me. It also went hand in hand with technology as well, which was, of course, has become so much more important nowadays.
Mm. So, at the beginning of your career, what were your tasks?
So, beginning my career, we didn't have very sophisticated databases. So, my job was to design databases and collect data from clinical trials. So, a lot of the work was almost done like paper mache, I'd say, putting paper together to make pages of what we call CRFs or clinical record forms, and we would get them sent off to the printer, and the patients and the doctors would fill in the forms. We would ask them questions about whether or not they had any, for example, side effects from the drug. But the beauty of starting in the industry at that stage was that we got to see everything. So we're able to design the forms that the patients entered information in, diary cards. We entered the data. We then analyze the data. So we had to bring in things like the statistics that you learned at university. We had to learn programming languages, which at that time was still quite new. And then you had to learn how to present data, doing presentations using Excel even. And so all of these things was on the job training because they weren't available at the time at university. We had to learn. But one of the interesting things about having an open mind and wanting to learn is that you can actually continuously learn on the job as well, and it never stops. Never stops.
And then, so you became naturally a data scientist. You said, yeah, that kind of data science chose you along the way.
I became a data scientist. So once I got into the job at Glaxo, I realized there were lots of, it was like a production line. So there's lots of different skills. We had to learn all of the skills, which was fine. But as the requirements from the regulatory authorities became more and more massive, it became obvious that people had to start specializing. So my sort of natural direction was to look at how people were reacting to the drugs. And I ended up specializing in collecting safety data. So just for an example, when you pick up a package of new tablets, paracetamol or something, in the package you get a leaflet which talks about how you're supposed to take the drug, the kind of side effects you might get if you take the drug, what to combine it with, what not to combine it with, when to eat it. So all information like that has to be collected from patients, put into database, has to be handled very carefully so that nobody abuses the data or changes it in their favor. And then it has to be analyzed, and this is what gives you the information about how many patients or what percentage of people tend to suffer from particular side effects. So I specialized in side effects data, looking at how we collect it, how we code it, how we prepare it, working with a team of statisticians, programmers, doctors, patients, clinical scientists. So it's a whole team effect that brings it all together in order to produce the analysis of that data.
Okay. So when you are, thinking about today, and is the process, of becoming a data scientist, has it become more complex or difficult so for the young people who come out of university to get this kind of job, or is there still quite some space and opportunities also through, I don't know, scholarships or internships and other ways in?
I think today it's difficult for young people to visualize that there is a career path as a data scientist. So there are very specific roles that young people see on a day-to-day basis. They go to the hospital to see a doctor. They might go to the chemist and see a pharmacist. And it's very
But they
difficult.
don't see a data scientist. Yeah, it's
They
true.
don't see a data scientist, no. So, one of the things I'm always encouraging girls to take science and technology as one of the main subjects at school, if possible, and progress in that. And there are some things that put off young people, or could put off young people, like programming and thinking that data scientists sits behind a computer all day, don't interact with people,
Right.
can't see how they help. So I think it's more difficult to know where to go in order to get the right education to do that. Nowadays there are masters in clinical data management and data management. They are masters in statistics. So you can specialize before going into a pharmaceutical company and perhaps taking up one of the roles as a data scientist. It's not obvious. It's not obvious at the schools. It's not obvious at universities. It's not obvious how to get into it, and exactly there's so many programming languages out there in the pharmaceutical industry. it's kind of quite specific. They don't use Python that everyone hears about. They use SAS and they use R. So, how does somebody know, particularly that those are the programming languages that you would need in order to go in to become a data scientist?
Since you are a data scientist today and you've been for quite some time, what are the skills that you require for your job? What can a young man and young woman expect if they were, having a chat with you and say, how can I choose if I want to be a data scientist? What should I know? How should I be prepared?
The foundation is always a good, strong scientific degree in a life science. So to be a data scientist in clinical trials, you need to have a good understanding of how laboratory data, for example, affects the body. When you're given a protocol to design a database, you need to be able to read the protocol, understand different disease areas. So having a strong background in physiology, human biology, anatomy, is very important. But then on top of that, you do need to have IT skills. So you don't necessarily need to be a programmer, because to be a programmer, you might want to program all day in order to keep your skills up. But you do need to have the skills to be able to talk to people, work in a team, bring things together, understand different aspects of the job, and understand the whole clinical trial process. And again, there are masters and courses in understanding how you move from finding or discovering a particular drug or discovering a mechanism of how drugs are going to work in the laboratory, right through to getting it what they call first in man. It's when they first start testing it in the human being, the human body, and then bringing the drug onto the market when it's actually released for sale and it's developed. So the whole process of the drug development is a complex process, but there are courses out there. And other backgrounds you need would be programming skills, language skills, IT, and life science degree.
Okay. And so is it true that you're always in front of a computer, or is that a myth?
I am in front of the computer a lot, but I think many jobs are.
That's true. I chose to be in sales because I wanted to be end up again in front of a computer.
Yeah, but I think it's also a matter of work-life balance as well. So, it's perhaps when you're younger, you're trying to climb the career ladder, and so you're working all the time. But it's really important to maintain other interests outside your job, other drivers for yourself as well. There's a reason why your mum or dad are driving you to your piano lessons every week, dragging you along, just so that you can disconnect and do other things as well. There's less travel now since COVID, but there was quite a lot of travel involved being a data scientist and in pharma.
Okay.
Because all drugs have to be developed all over the world. There's different regulatory authorities. People react differently. Just their genetic makeup means that they react differently to drugs. So every drug has to be tested in a different country as well to make sure it works specifically for that country. So there was a lot of travel, which was very interesting. A lot less now because people are much more conscious and of sitting on a plane all the time, and also because Teams, Zoom, has worked so well that people can connect.
Online meetings and so forth. Okay, I didn't know that you need to travel a lot to test in different countries to make sure that it works on different.
Well, we don't necessarily have to travel, but we have to work with teams in local countries. So, for example, if you were developing a drug in Taiwan, the Taiwan authorities would have specifications of how they want information to be submitted. They want to make sure that you've tested it in their gene pool, that the drug still works. And so you'd have to work with the local team to make sure they collect the data and explain how the data needs to be collected. And so there's always a team that would to work with.
So there's a lot of teamwork in in your job.
There is a lot of teamwork. And like I mentioned earlier, I did play a lot of sports. So this was really good for me. I mean, it was also something that got me my first job was that, they saw that I captained teams, and it was something that was important to me. And, working with people and the dynamics of teams is also very important too.
Mhm.
to be able to deal with.
And yeah, I'd like to also touch on a little bit on your work with young women, because you have an association that encourages girls in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. Do you find that it's more difficult for a young woman to, let's say, to shine or to find that her own career path in science?
Definitely. I mean, there's definitely an attrition by the time it comes to getting women to the top. When I was at university and my first job, I didn't see any issues. As far as I could see, we were the new generation coming through, and we were going to make strides, and there was nothing in to hold us back. But slowly, bit by bit, as I rose in the organization and I became more senior, you began to see a lot of women who dropped out, who felt that they didn't want to take it further, for some good reasons sometimes. But apart from that, women and girls find it difficult in the workplace, and they are not enough scientists, not just because when you're in a multidisciplinary team and you find that you're the only woman in the team, or if you're in a senior management team and you're the only woman in the team, it's not an accurate representation of the population. I mean, after all, there's
Right.
half the population is female.
Yeah.
And also within science as well, women's contributions is essential. Some of women's health drugs in women's health haven't been developed because it hasn't been opened up as a proper disease area. Some of the gynecological problems and things like that. So there is a huge attrition for women by the time they go to the top, but also there are not enough women joining in to be at a scientific level at a very young age. And it's something that I wanted to do something about it as I was working. Didn't quite know how I was going to be effective, because it is easy to be at the top, kind of talking about what you should do and trying to encourage women. I did find a way to make that difference, and when I came to Geneva, and that was
Okay.
to really look at how we can encourage girls like a very young age. Within Switzerland, at the age of 11 to 14, the
Hmm.
children go to what's called a cycle d'orientation. So they start to
Okay.
decide what kind of subjects they want to take. And it's at that age that the pressures come in, either from parents, from role models around them, from other girls in their class. And if they start finding themselves being the only girl in the physics class or in a computing class, then the will to stay on is difficult. And so we do, with this association, really encourage, especially role models, other women in the local Geneva area to come and talk about their jobs
Okay.
and show that it is possible, and they have that interaction. So even if at that particular time they don't see a reason, it's something they can reference to later in life to say, oh, I attended one of this science conference for girls, and now I understand that we have to get more women in science, and not to give up, not to be, if you're the only girl and then going on into engineering. It's nice if you're at the top and you're performing, and the first or second in the class. But if you're in the middle or the bottom, you still have the right to stay on
Yeah, yeah. You don't have to
and get that
excel to.
degree.
Yeah. No, that's such a
No, and
important. Yeah, important
yeah,
aspect.
and
Yeah,
it's only when you meet other women you see that other women have done it as well, and you think, yes, it is
I can
possible.
do it.
Um,
Yeah.
I can do it, and I need to encourage other women to do it as well. One of the things I was horrified in one of my jobs is being on a management team, and because that particular woman was going on maternity leave, they were saying that she wasn't eligible for the bonus that year because she couldn't meet all her objectives, and I was absolutely
Oh,
horrified. I argued the case, and I went back to the woman and I said, you have to fight your case. You can't accept this, because what you're doing now is setting a precedent for other women coming through. If you're going on maternity leave, you have the right to have your bonus, even if you're not there for the
yeah.
so many weeks you're taking off.
Mm-hmm.
And she didn't want to fight it. She was like, no, I'm late in my pregnancy, don't want any stress, don't want this, which is
Right.
understandable.
Yeah.
But it has to be taken into account,
Mm-hmm.
and we have to stand up for
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 that.
these kind of discrepancies, I would
Yeah,
say,
for sure. For
in the
sure.
workplace.
Yeah.
It's it's important.
Yeah, Lorena, I'm looking at the time and it's unfortunately time is running up, but I want to thank you for your precious witness and testimonial of your work and the work you're doing for others, especially for young women. And I will put the website on the description. If some girls and wanna know more about this. And I wish you all the best. And then please spread the voice. If there's more guests to interview, I'll be very happy to interview them.
You're very welcome, Laura, and thank you very much for taking the time to listen to me and to produce this podcast. It's great.
That was Lorraine Mcdowell, data scientist in the pharmaceutical industry. You will find more episodes on Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts, as well as any of your favorite players. I'm always looking for new guests, so please send me ideas to jobtalespodcast@gmail.com. Otherwise, see you next week for a new episode of Job Tales.